timely, and efficient wash services in fragile humanitarian setting. So the roadmap itself is implemented through 16 initiatives, and each of them being led by lead or co-lead by a roadmap actor. And among those initiatives, the initiative 4.3 specifically focuses on advocacy messages and related action for the whole humanitarian wash sector. And so as we know, thanks to the UN Water Conference, 2023, it's a quite a strategic year for the wash sector. And that is why the roadmap, through and thanks to the initiative 4.3, drafted the call to action and started an advocacy campaign to encourage its endorsement, basically. So as a sort of a first in humanitarian wash history, the call to action with his 5 commitments joins actors from all around the world, from different sectors and backgrounds, to come together for the same cause. Basically, it's about increasing the quality of wash services in fragile, conflict, and violent settings. And in just 3 months before the UN Water Conference, since the launch of the call to action, we have received the signature of over 175 actors, which ranged from small local NGO in Sahel to massive international organizational network, individual governments, feminist movements, European humanitarian NGOs, Native American rights organizations, etc., etc. So the call to action is uniting the world of the humanitarian wash, bringing much diversity and inclusion. So today, the WASH roadmap is convening this virtual coffee with the objective of, let's say, maintaining the momentum, keeping the discussion alive, and to create and to be to create space and to be a bridge between the UN Water Conference and all the relevant global events planned for the rest of the year. So we basically want to make sure that the effort made in the preparation and during the conference continue, and that the call to action is championed by and implemented within signatory organizations worldwide. And today we managed to gather diverse speakers to discuss the outcome of the UN Water Conference and how they picture the agenda to come. And for instance, for upcoming events such as the July UN High-Level Political Forum and other similar events. And well, so the agenda of today, the virtual coffee of today is divided in 4 sessions. The first one, it's about feedbacks from the UN Water Conference with voices from a government and a youth organization. The second session is on capacity and funding gaps faced by the humanitarian wash sector with voices from an humanitarian NGO, Action contre la Faim. Followed by a session on resilience and protection of humanitarian infrastructure with a voice from an international humanitarian organization, from the International Committee of the Red Cross. And eventually, the virtual coffee will close today with a session on governing the water sector with voices from 2 feminist leaders and again from another government. We will also have time for question and answer. One round of Q&A will be done just right after the first session, and the second round of Q&A will be conducted at the end. Therefore, please don't be shy, raise your hands, and also you can write your question in the chat, and we will choose at least one question for each topic. Well, finally, I have to make you aware that this virtual coffee is recorded and it will be available in the WASH Roadmap website and on the LinkedIn for a larger audience. So now, without further ado, I'm thrilled to give the floor to Henk Oving, a special envoy for international water affairs of the Kingdom of Netherlands. Over to you, Mr. Ovink.
Thanks, Claudio. And good to see you all in this call. A quick question, I would say, from my perspective, knowing that we're now a couple of months after the UN Water Conference. Of course, this discussion is of importance to see how we move the agenda forward. I'm not sure if you were all able to follow the conference online or be here in New York with the many others, but conference showed in the multilateral domain one of the larger challenges, and that not only was emphasized by the fact that this was the first time in 46 years that the world, in the context of the UN, got together. We, as water community, we see a lot of each other in the many events, organized around WASH or many other aspects of water. But in the context of like a formal UN meeting, that never happened in the last 46 years. And the reason for that is that the UN has no mandate on water. There is no treaty or agreement or compact or something that we see in biodiversity, that we see in climate, and that we see in many other aspects of the development or climate agenda. We don't see it on water. And that having the resolution in 2020 that sketched the modalities for this conference, it made it also very clear that yes, there was a conference in the midterm of the Water Action Decade that was going and be able to discuss that midterm, that could aim for voluntary commitments by all coalitions, governments, private sector, NGOs, individuals, etc. But that was not supposed to be a negotiation. So there was not a negotiated outcome. And that means that while the conference itself as a clear target point and therefore focus for many water and water-related partners, sectors, and actors. It also, in the lead-up, became a little bit of a, cover-up of the fact that there is no agreement on water, and we were all very focused. And I sent out a clear warning of this prior to the conference, saying, hey, we have to be very careful that we, being so busy in organizing a conference, we forget that we should actually be very busy and getting water security for all across this whole agenda. Now, the conference was organized around 3 principles: inclusivity, cross-sectorality, and action orientation. You've seen all of that. We had many voluntary commitments coming out of this, and the main structure of the conference were the 5 themes: water and sanitation and hygiene, and the human rights to water and sanitation and hygiene, water and all these nexuses for sustainable development between energy, infrastructure, cities, environment, food, and agriculture. Water and climate and biodiversity and disaster risk reduction was the 3rd theme. Water for cooperation across borders, sectors, governments, private. And the last was the water and the Water Action Decade, but also the outlook towards the future. So what's next? So the conference, attended by over 10,000 people from across sectors, more NGOs and private sector partners than government officials, although there were from over 180 countries political representation. We had over 100 mayors. So there was a real buy-in from the world and a showcase that water matters beyond WASH, that it is about everything in life and that we all care. The conference in itself also as a showcase that we needed the process of the conference to come together, but after the conference, there's no process anymore because there is literally no arrangement or agreement. Now, part of this is being dealt with thanks to the Water Action Agenda, which is actually was beyond the mandate of the conference, because we were only able to bring together voluntary commitments, but we said we have to bring them together in a structured manner. That became the Water Action Agenda, and that will now be validated and evaluated every year during the high-level political forum. And the first forum is upcoming in July, and every year as of now, we will have a water dedicated event and day to ensure that we do follow up. Second, we will see water elevated at the SDG Summit and the Summit of the Future, two anchoring moments in the next 2 years for setting the agenda for the future. And also at the end of this year in the Emirates under the presidency of the UAE, water and climate will be well presented in the context of the COP28. So those are stepping stones. At the same time, and that could, from my perspective, could be a question also to all of us, knowing that there is no multilateral agreement on water besides SDG 6 as a part of the SDG agenda. What do we need as a world? Because I personally, in my professional capacity, having a sequence of water events is a way to deal with that, but it can't be a substitute of agreeing on something in the context of water security, sustainability, justice, climate, and across. But I also do know that not everybody agrees, and that definitely was not an outcome of this conference because there was no negotiation. So there's also a big question mark on the table of the world on what is next. What is the capacity and the ability of the world on what is next? So I'm ending with questions next to, of course, I would say a very strong message coming out of this conference. The last 1.5 hours of that conference, you can all hear that back if you go to the website, where the 5 interactive dialogues as the main structure of the conference co-chairs reported back on those outcomes. And I think if you read back and hear back their conclusion, you will get from the stage of the multilateral world the strongest message on water we've ever heard before. So comprehensive, so dealing with all aspects. That has not been penned out and addressed. And that is also, again, because this is a non-negotiating conference. So there is literally no outcome document like that. So sorry to not have like a party moment here. We went into this conference knowing that billions of people around the world lack access to safe drinking water, hygiene facilities, and sanitation. We come out of the conference with the same number. We do know that water quality is undermining our biodiversity in all our ecosystems. We also know that we challenge the water cycle because of human behavior. The Global Commission on the Economics on Water again alluded to that. We see atmospheric rivers impacting water insecurity across continents these days. So freshwater availability of the right quality is only going down. So facts are bleak, you could say. The commitments that were made at the conference show that the world does care. But what do we need to ensure that we speed and scale up not only our actions, but also our governance, our collaborations, our capacities, our accountabilities across all to ensure that water security is driving the 2030 agenda towards achievement, and not as it's now, or to insecurity undermining achieving our goals. And we see with water warfare just now in the Ukraine, which is only one part of that agenda, how important it is that we do take care of our water in a very just, inclusive, and comprehensive way. Just ending here, open to reflections and questions, especially, because I think that will help us more than just another talk shop by me, Claudio, and Solen. There's a question.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ovink, leaving me a little bit with mixed feeling, of course, and then a bit concerned, but also at the same time excited that we are all here to try to. We are all here because we think we can have a role to carve and to frame the process that you said that does not exist. So hopefully we can together look forward with a bit of optimistic view. If you could bear with us for 10 more minutes, then I think people will have some question for you. So I'm quickly passing the floor now to the president of the Malawi Youth Parliament for Water, Willard J.P. Mead. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this meeting. I believe you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So my name is Willard John Pinfo from Malawi Youth Parliament for Water. We are working together with the African and the World Youth Parliament for Water, purposely to ensure meaningful participation of young people towards water governance with the three main objectives, that is local action is recognized and implemented in all water spheres, and also to ensure job opportunities are improved and diversified in around water governance, and also to ensure youth inclusion in decision making is the norm, not the exception. So we young people in the local societies, in the marginalized communities, and also other young people from different nations and regions, we gathered together and we documented our commitments to the UN Water Conference so that it can be presented on the front of our different governments. So we were very happy for that movement. It also helped to raise the voice of the voiceless. So next slide, please. Yeah, oh, thank you. So we are very much happy with the World Water Conference that was taking place in New York, because we are sure that our decisions that we collected from underprivileged societies were documented among different governments that were present on that time. So, but according to the implementation since the UN Water Conference was established or was launched, there's still some gaps that shows that implementation strategy in that time up to date is not well balanced. So, for example, in Malawi, as one of the poorest countries in the world, which ranked in 174 of 189 countries on the Human Index, and currently at 50%, with 1/5 of population living in extreme poverty. So many Malawians lack safe drinking water, good sanitization, income opportunities, resilience, and health care always continue to become major obstacles in the country. And however, the effects of climate change, pandemic, and outbreaks also continue to be some of the big dangers to the country development, and that exacerbates poverty and also hunger in the country. So like today, in our country, about 944,784 people are in urgent need of water services due to the outstanding effects of tropical cyclone Freddy, which came at the time when the country was fighting its deadliest cholera outbreak. And also general report from the Ministry of Water and Sanitation says over 4 million people in the Malawi lack access to safe drinking water, and only 6% people have access to the wash facilities. So this shows that since the first edition of the UN Water Conference up to date, not enough has been done. So we shouldn't expect enough to be done in the future if we cannot do enough today. So waiting for the future without doing something today is waiting for the future that will increase dangers to our societies. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. And so we have heard a lot of remarks during the conclusion of UN 2023 Water Conference regarding the transformative action without leaving nobody behind, the stakeholder engagement. Water is and shall remain everyone's business. So yes, these are the tangible statements that if they can be implemented, then at least our future it will sound positive, and it will be applicable, and it will be the environment that will be applicable to anyone around the water sector. So, but to move ahead, there is a task that we need to do, because we can't just wait for the government to do or the other country to do for us. We must ensure that as young people, we should be involved in the implementation strategy. So youth should rise and campaign for youth inclusion and diversity in the government, so that we can influence the policies that are made in the decision tables in the government to have at least a value with youth inclusion, so that together with the government and young people, we can help to build a more sustainable future around water sector. So we have also to promote and create enabling environment policies at country and sub-regional level to help youth establish their own businesses and their capacity effectively, and also manage them. We also have to promote platforms for youth groups and renewed research institutions, colleges, and other training centers to undertake some studies and understand some other latest opportunities and innovations. Is it in green economy, blue cash, and also digitalization, and to forecast water-related disasters for the development of early warning systems, as well as sustainable water management systems, to ensure that young people are taking part into the water governance sector, and to ensure that the developed systems should also be applicable to the marginalized societies. So next slide, please. Yeah, so we can also stand and revitalize national youth policy around water governance and related water sectors. And to do that, there is a need to upscale the accessibility of national youth policy around water governance towards young people in marginalized community, and we have to equip them. And after equip them, then they will be able to know their role to play in the Sustainable Development Goal 6, because the reason why there's low youth participation in the Sustainable Development Goal 6 is because some other policies are not accessible by the youth in the underprivileged societies. But if they can know these policies, if they can participate into the decision table making, then they'll be able to contribute their views, and together we can make a future that is resilient and sustainable around water governance. So we should also aware that we shouldn't wait long, because we already having the potential at hand. Like, we should aware that existing national policy that we have talks about high youth participation in environmental related sectors such as water governance. If we add that plus cooperation and partnership, it is the primary key to take concrete action in the process of achieving goal. So the national youth policies are available in almost in each and every country. But if we understand that these national youth policies, what they say is that they talk about high participation of youth participation, but on the implementation side, there's no such kind of a high youth participation. So we youth, we have to take action today so that we can force ourselves to engage into the national youth policy and know what we must do as well. So lastly, we need to develop and empower a well-coordinated collaboration of youth and the local authorities in marginalized societies to upscale youth participation. So if young people can work together with local authorities like village headman, then they will be able to stand as a radar to take part into the process of achieving the goal. So that's how we can take steps instead of waiting longer for other countries to do for us, but we have to know what to do by facilitating information and knowledge management around water governance in the rural areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wheeler, for this inspiring presentation. Now we open up to some question and answer. I would kindly ask to Joe if you could read the selected question, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few questions here, and I've chosen to combine a couple together, which seem to me to be related. So from Brian, he talks about whether there's going to be an envoy for water. Any news on this? And then also from Tilo, he's asked about about this dedicated or kind of next steps, really. There's going to be a dedicated follow-up event every year. Will UN Water also be leading on this for the following year? So basically, trying to clarify the real kind of tangible next steps.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. And I saw the questions too, and I think there's a good amount of dynamics at the side of the UN groups on the multilateral side, among the member states and within the UN itself. As there is no UN treaty or arrangement, there is also no UN capacity. So 149 countries last year asked for at least a voice on water to represent this and start to build capacity. Amina Mohammed, on behalf of Secretary General Guterres, addressed member states 3 weeks ago and assured that there will be capacity at the UN going forward. Supposedly at UNDESA, in strong collaboration with UN Water as a coordinating mechanism, plus a UN envoy. So there will be like three triangular approach of capacity at the UN, someone to call and to operate, like the real policy home for water, you could say, the coordinating mechanism of UN Water in place and aligned with that, as well as the appointment of a UN envoy. And that appointment of a UN envoy, of course, will be a transparent process. Terms of reference will be drafted by the UN, and there will be, they will announce it. We don't know how, but that is what is in the hands of the UN. So that is one part. The second part is the follow-up, so part of your question, but also important on this institutional part, is what is the follow-up of these commitments? And I think we took a first step prior to the conference and the lead up to the conference to get a better grip on what these commitments were. Are these old and outdated or not traceable? But they are actually, and World Resources Institute helped us a bit as a first step to understand better where they came from and what they try to achieve. And over a third of them are really good. So they have the real promise to deliver change in the context of the ambition that they set forward. Again, moving back to the institutional part, also part of the questions, yes, every year at the high-level political forum, we will see an update of the progress of these commitments and SDG 6, as well as water across the 2030 agenda. Second, this year SDG 6 and the SDG review is on the agenda. And within that review, we will also see highlighted how the UN will take forward their work on water. So there is, thanks to the conference, a lot of dynamics that is leading to better capacity, transparency in that sense and accountability when it comes to this. How this will then work out, of course, we'll see. But a year from now, we should be able to see definitely change when it comes to institutional capacity at the UN, within this, with UN Water and to be appointed envoy. So leadership, as well as this agenda as a backbone for that. And thirdly, and I would say for me that is really as a third part of critical importance, are we able to drive water in the agenda of all those other agreements that we have? And we 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, 1.5 years ago in September, we had a food system summit where we agreed on food security for all and how to achieve that. But water was not part of that. And we know that without taking care of our water, we can't even think about food security. So that can never happen again. And last COP was the first time water was mentioned in a cover text. Well, that's nothing. It's it's a political declaration. Water is not part of the negotiations. When you move on climate, then you will lose on climate. Water is of critical importance for both mitigation and adaptation. We tend to focus on also only on adaptation because that's where the impact is. But water security is at the core of climate change. So I think being able in the year and years moving forward to really galvanize the position of water in the agreements that we have is going to be as important as figuring out how this water agenda will move forward. So there is silver linings on the horizon on the institutional and political and societal capacity. There's definitely action and commitment from across, and there's a process moving forward.
Thank you very much indeed for taking the extra time for giving us this comprehensive answer, and I really appreciate your participation in this session. We're looking forward to have further discussion with you. And now, unfortunately, for the sake of time, I need to move ahead with the next session.
Thank you.
Which is
and look forward to be in touch. I also have to drop off because I have another call. I'm very sorry. It's good to see you and hear you, and look forward to see you further down this challenging road. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. And next session, I'm pleased to pass it over to Malo Rivoallan from Action contre la Femme, who will give us the summary of the study conducted by ACF on the capacity and the funding gaps that the humanitarian wash sector is currently facing globally. Over to you, Malo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Malo Rivoallan, and I will be presenting the WASH Funding Gap Report 2023. So that's a report that was made by ACF US in collaboration with ACF France and also international. So let's dig in. The report first of all, you need to know that the report was launched after in the 2023 Water Day at the UN conference. So it reveals the critical gap in funding of humanitarian wash programs. So those humanitarian wash programs are key to promoting health, preventing malnutrition, and reaching the UN SDGs. So the report also focuses on humanitarian funding, so in emergency, in natural disasters, conflicts, and other acute crises. In those contexts, clean water and safe sanitation are really key to saving lives and promoting stability. So, for example, you have on the right some figures about the development state of where we are in development, and those figures are very likely to be exacerbated if we don't have proper WASH funding. So I'm going to jump over to the findings of the report. So the first finding is that HRP, so Humanitarian Response Plan of 2022, was underfunded on WASH. So across 41 countries, Humanitarian Response Plan in 2022 was underfunded by 70%. So that means that it has a direct impact on human lives. So for example, on the right, you can see that preventable diseases related to water and sanitation are responsible for 27% of deaths of children under 5. So we need to really tackle this issue right now because it's really impacting people's lives. The second finding is that the WASH humanitarian funding gap grows over time. So if you take a look at the chart, you can see that from 2016 to 2022, the gap has grown from 41% in 2016 and over 70% in 2022. You can also see another takeaway from this chart is also the needs that are growing. We're coming from 2016 with $1.2 billion of funding requirements, and we're reaching $3.7 billion in 2022. So that's the two takeaways from this chart. The third finding is the next slide. In the next slide, you can see the third finding that the WASH is underfunded across 13 countries experiencing crisis level of hunger. So as you know, in ACF, our mandate really focuses on nutrition. And so we really wanted to know the links between nutrition and WASH. And here our report shows that none of the 13 countries that experience hunger crisis have any of their WASH needs funded. So we try to estimate this data, and we saw that 38% of their WASH related needs were met. So that's way too low, and we really need to tackle this issue. Here we also put the link to our 2023 hunger funding gap, if you want to know more about this subject. And then our fourth finding is that among other sectors, the WASH is deprioritized. So here you can see that obviously health, WASH, and hunger are underfunded. So the three of them are underfunded, and that's an issue we should tackle. And also you can see that they're really intertwined, and health and hunger will be achieved by working on WASH projects. And also, obviously, you can see that even if the three of them are underfunded, the WASH sector is more underfunded. So we can see that there's a deprioritized allocation of funding. Now we can go to the recommendations that we have that comes from this report. So the first one, obviously, is to sign the WASH roadmap call to action. We invite everybody to join the call to action and urge the UN, government donors, and other funders to act on the links between hunger and WASH as a critical step towards promoting equity and saving lives. So a good thing to notice here is the two first points of this 5-point call to action are directly targeting funding. So you have them on the right. So we really need that funding. We really think that funding is key to tackle here. And the second recommendation is obviously to share this funding gap report. So there's a QR code if you want to flash it to have access to the report. And obviously we'll be more than happy to discuss it with you. There's also a phone number and an email. So you can just reach out and we can talk about how we can help you and provide you with information. And that's over. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Malo. I would like now to pass the floor to our colleagues at ICRC, and they will tell us about the resilience and protection of humanitarian infrastructure. I guess Guillaume is going to present, or David as well. Guillaume, the head of Water and Habitat Unit. Over to you, Guillaume.
Thank you, Claudio. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Malo, for this good introduction about funding, which is indeed something I will mention during my presentation. So resilience and protection of humanitarian infrastructure is a topic of I have been asked to talk about, and so I will go through the different slides and explain a few concepts and talk about some cases. So you can move to the next slide, Solène. Eventually, everything that I will say is detailed in some documents, reports, which we have been publishing over the years, and so I strongly encourage you to look at them, to read them. They are all available on our website. The four that are here are probably amongst the most important. So the first one is Joining Forces report, which we published together with the World Bank and UNICEF, and which is really detailing concrete recommendations for humanitarian and development actors to basically support water and sanitation service providers in order to build the resilience of these services. And so it's really a very important one, and we'll see a while later. The second is called Towards More Effective Humanitarian Operations in Urban Areas of Protracted Armed Conflict. And there it's really learnings about our program that we are implementing in Gaza, that we call the Gaza Resilience Program, which is an integrated program working on the resilience of essential services in a multidisciplinary way, and really learnings that we are gaining from all the experience there, and which can be also helpful for others. The third is about explosive weapons with wide area effects, and there it's really detailing basically what are the consequences of urban warfare in cities, and why it needs to be changed, why some things need to change in that way. And indeed, then the next one is a handbook for military commanders on how they can better apprehend a city and try to change their military tactics in order to reduce harm on services, on people, and on infrastructure. And Patrick, yes, I will make sure that we share the link with the audience after the presentation. So if we move to the next slide. So why is this important today? It's important because the number of conflicts worldwide have doubled in the past 20 years, and that unfortunately none of them have been resolved, and none of them have indeed all of them, or most of them, have indeed no end in sight. This basically as a consequence, as we reach record numbers in terms of people in need of humanitarian assistance, figures that have been already mentioned before, but so it's really hundreds of millions of people who are in need these days, and also going in parallel with the fact that we see very little progress, if not even sometimes regress in sustainable development goals in those contexts, in those countries. And so there is also additional, I would say, needs, consequences that we need to address. And unfortunately, very much linked to what Malo was saying just before, the humanitarian funding is plateauing or even decreasing now. So we'll have to do with less in the coming years, and that's so we need also to adapt the way we work in trying to have more impact with less resources. We can pass to the next slide, Salene. Thank you. So the reality of today, I just talked about it, but for the ICRC, is the fact that we have to deal with large-scale emergencies on a constant basis over the past decade. We should remember Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Congo, Yemen, Gaza, and right now Ukraine and Sudan. Very large-scale emergencies that humanitarians have to deal with. Second, the fact that indeed most of them become protracted crises at some point, and it's increasing, and it's often the most serious consequences we see in cities. So we have, if we look at basically the water and habitat team of the ICRC, we have been present in countries like Iraq, Palestine, Congo for more than 30 years, in Myanmar since 25 years, in Syria since 15 years, and in Ukraine for over 10 years already. So we cannot afford to leave those places because there are remaining needs that needs to be addressed and which are not systematically addressed by other states, development actors, or other organizations. And indeed, the impact of conflicts on essential services is systematic in all these crises. So what are these impacts? This is an infographic that is coming from our Urban Services Report, which we published in 2015, and which I also strongly advise you to read in case you didn't already. And it really basically explains what's happening in those protracted conflicts that we have been observing for the past 40 years. So there is, of course, a direct impact that we have all in mind. I think what happened in Ukraine recently with the destruction of the dam of Novakhovka is what we all have in mind. And this has, of course, that can have a massive impact. I think this event is just an example of that. But what we see mostly is indirect impact in protected conflict. Brain drain, reduction of budget, sanctions, embargoes, depletion of spare parts and consumables, and all of them linked together, sometimes having a reverberating impact. It can be on geographically or on other services. This really eventually all together lead to a cumulative impact on essential services and a reduction level of these services, which unfortunately often becomes irreversible at some point, meaning that we need again to start from scratch. We cannot repair, we cannot rebuild, we cannot restore. We have to destroy everything and rebuild from scratch. And it's also across services, meaning it's not just water, but it's of course sanitation, it's energy, it's health, and it's really everywhere in those cities. So for the people, of course, what are these this impact? It means direct deprivation of access to these services. We have large fractions of population which do not have any more access to services which they had before. This, of course, as I think for us WASH engineers, it's obvious it has an impact on public health. We all have in mind cholera outbreaks which are spreading in some of these areas. But also displacements. It really leads to displacement of people. When people have no more access to essential services, they go on the move. Sometimes they are really forced to do it. And of course, also impact on the livelihood, because when these essential services disappear, then basically there is much less opportunities for people to still have income. We can move to the next slide. And there just very quickly, just to remind that basically these essential services are interconnected and interdependent, and so we really need to consider them as a whole. We cannot deal with water alone. We need to look at electricity, energy. We need to look even at transport, at communication, because these services, to be functional, to be resilient, they are interdependent, and so they need to work all together. Next, please. And also a very important point is, if we think in terms of resilience of these services, it's not just about the infrastructure. It's not an infrastructure cannot deliver a service by itself. It needs staff and it needs consumables. And so in our approaches, we really need to make sure that these are considered, these are supported, these are maintained. We guarantee their access, the access of staff to the places of their work, in order to make sure that these services can take place. Next. So now a few words about protection, and indeed what that means for the ICRC, but beyond. And so here it's I would like to say that basically, yes, IHL contains important rules aimed at ensuring that essential services are not disrupted during an armed conflict, and that critical infrastructure and essential services personnel are protected. Most of the rules that are mentioned, that I will mention, are applicable both in international and non-international armed conflicts, which is important because a lot of the conflicts of today are non-international. And in terms of international humanitarian law, there are some different rules which apply, but these apply eventually everywhere. And so what's important is that there is a general protection afforded to all civilians, so meaning to all people, and civilian objects. And so when we think about water infrastructure or essential services infrastructure, these are considered as civilian objects. So they are protected. They should be protected by parties to conflict. They should not be hit. They should not be harmed. They should not be misused or targeted or whatever. But there is even a heightened protection for certain objects and people, and in particular, objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population, like water infrastructure. There, I would like to mention in particular the recent resolution of the UN Security Council 2573, which was presented by Vietnam, and which really reinforced this principle of protection of essential services and protection of essential personnel for this. It's important also to mention that the fact that there are some also special works and installation containing dangerous forces which require special protection, and that's typically dams. And so that's why the destruction of the dam which took place in Ukraine is particularly concerning, because these kind of works of facilities installations should really be at all cost protected during a conflict, because we see, I mean, if you read the news today, you see basically I mean the massive impact that it has, which is immediate, but which we all know as engineers will be long term. Because you cannot repair a dam like this in a couple of hours. It's impossible. It will take a very long time before this dam is put back into shape. There is also special protection for medical facilities, transport personnel. There is a prohibition against starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. There is, of course, also some consideration about the protection of the natural environment, which includes water resources, which should be protected also to guarantee the provision of essential services. And eventually, of course, which is important for us as humanitarian, there is a protection of access and the protection of humanitarian relief operations. So we as humanitarians are and should be protected during armed conflict in order so that we can provide the necessary aid, emergency aid to the population. So if we move to the next slide, I will then just say a few words about what, as ICRC, we are doing when we talk about protection and assistance. So first of all, if we take an example, the example of the dam in Ukraine, what we need first to do is to document, to analyze, to investigate. We need to understand what happened. Why this happened, who did that, of course, and we try then we will do, of course, a legal analysis to analyze if there has been a violation of international humanitarian law, and then as ICRC we will engage a dialogue, bilateral and confidential, with those who are responsible for it, and try to make sure that this will never happen again. That's the way of the ICRC to deal with that. There are, of course, other organizations which will be more on the plaidoyer side, on the public domain, and which information they may have would then put it in the public domain in making sure that these kind of things would never happen again. Or it could also be put in trying to put the responsible of such events to bringing them to court in their country or in an international court. So that's different ways of protecting. And for the resilience part and the intervention that we can make, basically it's a combination of different things. There is, of course, the emergency response, which is essential because we need first to make sure that people can have access to a minimum level of services. And then we will try mostly to work on stemming the rate of decline of these essential services. And that's a big burden in many of these places because of the sheer scale of these needs. And so it's really important to, from any new type of intervention, to try to bring resilience principle into it. And there I'm not talking just about humanitarians, I'm talking also about development actors. That's why this joining forces report is really essential, because that's only together that will make sure resilience can be built. And so with that, hopefully the dependence on humanitarian assistance will reduce with time. So it's really about local partnership, making sure that service providers will receive the support that they need, and that in terms of infrastructure, typically there are this, but also management of these services. They are brought up with redundance, reducing single points of failures, and all of that. And I think that's all. So maybe just a last word on the UN 2023 Water Conference. There were a lot of events, talks about protection, about IHL, about conflict, about resilience. Unfortunately, we see that it had relatively low echo. I think what Henk said also before more widely, but we see that, for example, there was basically no mention of these keywords in the proceedings of the conference. So meaning that we are still very far from being heard enough, being supported enough, and so that means we'll have to talk more about these topics between us, but also most broadly to new audiences, so that there is a prise de conscience, and there is more awareness about that and more support coming to us over time. Voilà, I will stop there. Thank you very much.
This was fantastic, Guillaume. Thank you very much for this in-depth presentation in such a short time, which can perfectly linked to one of the 5 asks of the call to action as well. So I need to move forward now with the last session, which is composed by 3 speakers. I will kindly ask the 3 next speakers to try to stay under the 10 minutes, because we would like to have few minutes of a couple of question Q&A. But please, Lesha Whitmer, over to you from the Women for Water Partnership. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Very good. You can go to the next one. I'm going back to where we started. What are we actually promising? And what are we actually going to do? Because moaning, I'm sorry, is not going to help us. So the first one is that there were a few new items during the UN Water Conference, which focused a lot on capacity development, jobs creation, education, and what have you. And I think that is a pretty important part, because we can be very, very ambitious, but if we don't have the people to actually make it true, then nothing is going to happen. So Women for Water said we will help develop the World Water and Sanitation Workforce Initiative. Stay tuned. We'll come back to all of you. This is really about getting the hands and the minds and the heads to make it possible to even reach all the goals of SDG 6. The second one is the Coalition on Mentoring. A lot of our young people are complaining that they can't get into the domain. They don't get hired. They have huge problems in their career planning. So with now initially 8, but in total, if everybody agrees, over 20 organizations, we will set up a system to actually make it possible to help young people, but also older people to re-enter the labor market. Let's not forget that. And see how we can help them. Then there is the Action on Gender Equality in the water domain. This has been going on for a little bit longer already, but it's not strong enough yet. We need more countries, but also more non-state actors to actually help us there. And last but not least, the discussion on the dissemination of funding. Because everybody's moaning about not enough funding, but we're quite convinced that part of the problem is that it doesn't reach the people who can actually do something. The last statistics on this talk about 0.35%, you hear me correctly, of money that is allocated, but not reaching the groups that are actually doing the work. And that is another discussion and methodology change that we need to do. Next, please. So there are a few items there. I am repeating myself. 52% of the world's population is female. And we are not involving them in decision making, in planning, in working in the water sector, which means a huge lack of capacity and a huge lack of funding. So we need to do something about that. I heard some of the colleagues already talk about we need money. Yeah. But we don't need money for another project of 6 months. No point. We need funding for helping local groups to actually make sure that we can do a longer term process. And one of the tools could be gender sensitive budgeting. And of course, that is somewhat of a dangerous way of putting it. But it's also talking about good intentions, a budget being allocated, where does it go? So it's actually monitoring, and somebody was talking about transparency and how do you call that? Following the money. This could be one of the ways to actually do that. And another one is the capacity development of vocational education. There is still huge problems with vocational education when it comes to involving women and young people, by the way, because they don't really have access to the issues that they could actually help with. Capacity development lots of times is, oh yeah, we'll give you a 1-day training and then you're on your own. It doesn't work that way. So there are quite a number of things we can improve on, which, to be honest, don't need additional money. They need another allocation of money, which is a totally different issue. So please go to the next. Yeah, just to give a little twist on in your minds. There are 3 different ways of involving women. Involvement of women, meaning that they're involved in the implementation. Women-only projects, and systematic inclusion of women. Of course, you understand that I would be in favor of the last one, but I'm quite happy if we have a larger amount of projects doing 1 or 2. Next. So why am I pushing this? Because one is everybody agrees from 1992 and forward that women are crucial when it comes to water management, to actually helping at the local level, and we still don't do it enough. And Joe, I just saw your comment. I would be very happy to work with the capacity development group too, and invite you to become a member of our coalition to actually do this. So it's a sequence of things that sounds so easy, but in actual practice are not. And going back to our friend Henk Ovink at the beginning of this session, of this whole event, there were a lot of women there. When it comes to side events, when it came to special events, to what have you. But if you look at the comments in the plenary, not so much. So that's another thing, which of course we can't solve as a water community, which is an overall arching issue. How do we get more women into decision making and negotiating positions? But making sure that we listen to them, whichever position they have, is extremely important. So to address the... Yes, please.
I'm just going to interrupt you. This is Jo. We're really sorry to kind of push you on, but we've got another couple of presentations to do. So,
but you had the other gentleman pushing for 20 minutes almost. So don't do this to me, right? Because I'm just a woman here. No. I'll finish my presentation and do not do what you just did. Sorry, you can't. The guy from whatever he was, Milami, he went on forever. So next, so don't do that. This is discriminating. Really, really bad, Joe. Sorry. Next slide, please. So main lessons. You can all read this, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I think it's extremely important to make sure that the top level people are committed, not just on paper, but really. And I think it's extremely important to make sure that we have to change our HR policies and regulations, because otherwise it will not go anywhere. Next, please. So here's a full report on what I just said. Please read it. You can just click on it and go for it. And my last comment is that I think it is extremely important to make sure that we have a very good comment to the HLPF on the mandate of the Special Envoy. And I'm not sure whether that fits into our current program, but I think that's what we need to do to make sure that we go places. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much, Lisha. Over to Ziadat Hashimi, founder and president of Women for Water, Climate and Environment. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ziadat Hashimi. I'm a WASH consultant and expert in youth development program, founder of the Women for Water, Climate and Environment organizations, which is part of the global youth movement for water that I'm representing here today. Next slide, please. The Women for Water, Climate and Environment is a youth and women-led organization founded in 2018 and aimed at addressing gender inequality in access to clean water, hygiene and sanitation. And we advocate for the right of access to WASH. We promote gender equity and power girls on the triple effect of climate change, menstrual health and WASH. We facilitate access to sanitation products and service in schools and rural community. We create Girls' Corner safe space for engaging the calls in school for mentorship and peer learning. We also use digital technology to educate, advocate, and raise awareness on WASH. Next slide. So about the Global Youth Movement for Water, the movement was launched at the last 9th World Water Forum in Dhaka, March 2022, supported by the International Secretary of Water and aim at gathering any youth-led structure to pool all resources and increase our bargaining power with the clear intention to influence decision-making and stimulate concrete action at all levels and in all relevant fields. The movement connects organizations active in water and youth space to foster collaboration and synergy and increase the outreach and impact of all actors in the sector from the local to the global level. Uh, it provides more visibility, credibility, and recognition to existing and emerging youth-led network and organizations such as mine, as they engage and support individual youth who wish to act. Next slide, please. The objective of the Youth Global Movement for Water for the UN Water Conference was to mobilize and empower youth on the road to the UN Water Decade Conference, influence decision makers on the road to the UN Water Conference, ensure significant representation of youth voices and priority during the UN Water Conference. And in order to achieve those goals, next slide please, a series of initiatives and activity were put in place from local to global level to support and empower the voice of youth, foster significant youth inclusion in the preparatory process of the UN Water Conference. Several national and regional youth events were led and organized by youth organizations such as mine. Here in Benin, we have the privilege by being selected and financial support by the International Secretary for Water, organized the West African Youth Dialogue on water and related SDGs in partnership with other youth-led organizations here in Benin. Next slide, please. The main goal of our events was to allow for a greater number of youth to have their voice to be heard during the UN Water Conference. And these events mobilized over 100 youth and different stakeholders from the West African region and influence local youth leaders and decision makers in the importance of this conference, identify the key priority of the West African region, and gather commitment for the water action agenda. And the key highlights of our event was the fact that we really emphasize that most in West African country, governments don't really focus on wash. The priority is given to access to clean water, and hygiene and sanitation is left behind. Girls and women are still facing the challenge of access to clean sanitation infrastructure, access to clean water in school, and some of girls having difficulty to manage their menstruation when they are attending schools, what leads them to drop out of school or missing schools when they are menstruating. So we really emphasize on the urgent needs to redirect our hygiene and sanitation policy to make sure that we can achieve the water agenda by 2030. And we also emphasize on the fact that youth need to be included in the decision-making process because we are the future generation and we need to be part of the solution. We need to decide what works better for us. And for this to happen, government stakeholders need to work directly with youth who are already working with local community through local action and commitment and projects in the country. After the regional conference organized by our organization, the results of this regional dialogue were presented at the UN Water Conference during different side events and really help connect local youth movement to the global conferences. Next slide, please. So the outcome of the UN Water Conference for Youth from the Youth Global Movement for Water was that youth voice was strongest and most influential in the following interactive dialogue, especially access to wash, including human right to safe drink water and sanitation, where myself, I participated as a speaker. I share my work, the experience that I have working with community, addressing hygiene and sanitation, especially menstrual hygiene management in school, the impact of the local community projects that we have led with the support of the International Secretary in rural community, and how this has really improved girls' education in those communities. Also, we have the transboundary and international water cooperation, cross-sectoral cooperation, including scientific cooperation and water across the 2030. And finally, accelerating the implementation of the objective of the decades, including through the UN Secretary General Action Plans. Next slide, please. The two messages that were particularly well conveyed by the youth people at the conference were that we young people should be included in water-related mechanisms, negotiation, and decision so that they can be part of the solution, like I said earlier. That an inclusive and permanent body be created within the United Nations to address water challenge. We need our voice to be heard more louder. Next slide, please. And finally, our roadmap for the after conference is to continue strengthening the global youth movements for water, to increase awareness and water advocacy by ensuring that youth voices are included in water-related policies and decision-making process, ensuring monitoring and accountability through follow-up and accountability of the 774 commitments made to the Water Action Agenda. Bridging the local to the global, connect global discussion and statement to the local priority and program. Enhance participation of youth in global process, earlier preparation to earlier access to accreditation, sponsorship opportunity, capacity building, and training. Because what we noticed during the UN conference was the fact that many youth were not able to attend this conference because of those challenges, the lack of maybe access to visa, fund, but they have the very good background and they are making real impact in their community. So this movement is here to empower the voice of those youth and facilitate their access to all those resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ziadat. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Marc-André Busli from the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation. If we could elaborate his point from the Swiss government in the last 5 minutes. Over to you, yes. Marc-André.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in Jordan, so I have connection issues. I won't be able to put the camera on. It was very interesting to listen to all the statements that we heard until now. The UN Water Conference was a conference that was mainly for the member states. And as a member state, Switzerland has a different perspective, I think, than many speakers up to now. We found it a great success because it has been a unique opportunity for many member states to discuss, to have an exchange. And I would like to come back to two events that happened there. there has been an event co-organized by Mozambique and Switzerland in the UN Security Council on the protection of wash infrastructure in conflict. And this had never been discussed in the UN Security Council. So for us, it has been an extremely important moment to be able to bring it during the Water Week, the Water Conference in New York, to bring it to the Security Council and to launch a discussion. Security Council is maybe not the best governments. It takes a lot of time. It's slow, but it's very important to be there to put this discussion, to start a discussion, and to know that there will be follow-up discussions. It's going to be a long-term effort, but we hope that we will be able to make a difference there. So that's a typical multilateral event for member states, which is not going to produce immediately results, but when you, after many years of negotiation, there is a UN Security Council resolution, then it can change the situation on the ground. So we think that we need to have the patience and the courage to continue pushing the topics that are important. That's how the multilateral world is going. So it's of course it's too slow. We also think it's too slow, but at least something is moving. There's a lot of debate if security and water should be treated jointly. It's also, I hear a lot of call that there should be one UN water body. In most countries, water is managed by 5, 8, 10 different ministries. Why should the UN be faster to have one single UN water that would be able to deal with that? So I think just to insist a little bit on that one, it's important to see that we have had a success with the conference. There is something else I would like to mention. Senegal and Switzerland had the honor to chair one of the interactive dialogue. We have been responsible for chairing the interactive dialogue on water corporations. There were incredible numerous inputs from many member states at very high level, permanent representative, ambassadors, ministers, prime minister that came, and they all in fact said the same. They insisted on the importance of political collaboration among member states to be able to manage the water crisis. So there is a will among the states to collaborate as much as possible to be able to handle the water crisis. I think that's something very positive. And just to give you an example what it means concretely, there is currently an alliance of member states who try to make a resolution and the UN General Assembly to have a series of UN water conferences to make sure that we would have regularly water conferences, for example, every 3 years, like the COP, that are regular. And it's only if we have regular conferences that we will be able to put sufficient pressure so that the things will start moving. So one single conference is not enough, but maybe to have a series of conferences and to have then time to prepare. And as we have been seeing in this water conference, many people mobilizing before, there's plenty of ideas, there's plenty of energy, there's plenty of new momentum, and then it can change something on the longer term. I'd like to explain briefly why Switzerland decided to support the call to action to the WASH roadmap, because it's perfectly aligned to our priorities. Survival WASH, of course, is a priority. We have a human tradition. WASH is one of the priorities of Switzerland, besides protection, disaster risk reduction, food security and livelihood. It insists on coordinations. It insists on resilience and climate change adaptation. And all these are important topics that need to be kept in the discussion. That's why we wanted to support the call to action. The respect of international humanitarian law, Guillaume made a very complete presentation, what it means and what are the consequences of it. Of course, as depository of Geneva Conventions, we can only support a call to respect them more. And the question of the special envoy has already been discussed, and the importance of having one. Now, I would like to take a second hat and take the hat as the second co-chair of the WASH roadmap to say something maybe also on how I perceive with a Swiss perspective, but also with a WASH roadmap perspective, the call to action. I think the success that we have had with the call to action is a very positive sign that new alliances among partners not used to cooperate is possible. In fact, we have brought so many different people together, different agencies from a very large alliance of people and member states. Now we have 3 France and Chad joined after Switzerland. I think it's really important to insist on the fact that we need cooperation. And I have been listening in New York and again today. I have a strange feeling with our water sector because we have too much divisive forces and not enough cohesion. Young people think that they are the only solution. Women think they are the only solution. It's always when we were in New York, the private sector was saying that they are the only solution. The multilateral agencies were saying that they are the only solutions. And I don't think that all these divides are very useful. I mean, to oppose or to think the donors and actors are not in the same boat doesn't help. To think that water or sanitation should compete with each other doesn't make sense. To think that humanitarian actors and development actors cannot collaborate is a strange view of seeing things. To think that urban is more important or less important rural doesn't help us very much. And I don't think that opposing developing and developed countries that makes sense in a world where we all depend on the same water cycle. So I think what is really important is that we put our efforts together to cooperate and to go, because cooperation is really the only way to get out of the water crisis, and it's to cooperate in an inclusive manner, of course, to have a sustainable management of the whole water cycle, because that's what we belong to. We are water. We are made of 60% of water, and we should finally find our place in this water cycle and make sure that we make a contribution to it in a cooperative manner. Thank you.
And with this final closing remark, with the hat of co-chair of the roadmap, I don't have any additional closing words. And then, unfortunately, we don't have time for other question and answer. But again, if you write us, we will make sure that you get your answer. For the sake of time and respect of your time to everybody, I am now obliged to close the call. Thank you very much to the speaker and to the audience. This was an amazing virtual coffee, the first virtual coffee of the roadmap that organized with external individual and external organization, not only with actor of the roadmap. So it was quite exciting. I think we will get united and we will diversify at the same time our voice quite smoothly and with a good synergy. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Au revoir.